Raymond Van Barneveld is a name that resonates far beyond the dartboards of pubs and arenas. He is one of dart's most celebrated figures, a five-time world champion, a Dutch pioneer, and a national icon. And in the sport he helped elevate, there was one night that left a deeper scar than any other. It was January 1st, 2017, in the semifinals of the PDC World Championship, where he met Michael van Gerwen in what would become a historic and heartbreaking encounter. For many, it was the match that broke Raymond Van Barneveld. Van Barneveld began his darts journey in the 1980s in The Hague. By the 1990s, he had become a dominant force in the British darts organization, BDO, winning his first world title in 1998 and going on to secure 4 more before switching to the PDC in 2006. His transition was swift and spectacular. In 2007, he famously defeated Phil Taylor in a sudden death leg in what is still considered one of the greatest matches in darts history, becoming a 5-time world champion in the process. For the next decade, Van Barneveld remained a key fixture in the PDC. His smooth throw, calm demeanor, and emotional connection with fans made him one of the most beloved figures in the game. He played not only with his hands but with his heart, a trait that earned him respect, but also left him vulnerable to the psychological toll of high-level competition. By 2017, Van Barneveld was nearing 50, but he was far from finished. He entered the World Championship at Alexandra Palace in superb form, having defeated legends like Phil Taylor en route to the semi-finals. His opponent was Michael van Gerwen, the young juggernaut from the Netherlands who had already usurped the #1 spot in the world rankings and was dominating the sport with ruthless consistency. What followed was one of the highest quality matches in darts history. Van Barneveld started strong, taking the first set 3-0. But Van Gerwen responded like a man possessed, winning the next 2 sets. Van Barneveld clawed back to make it 2-2, but then Van Gerwen unleashed a level of darts few had ever seen. He won 4 consecutive sets to close out the match 6-2. Yet the scoreline did not reflect the true nature of the battle. Van Gerwen set a new world championship record with an astonishing average of 114.05, while Van Barneveld, in defeat, averaged 109.34, the highest losing average in the tournament's history. 29 maximum 180. Dozens of high checkouts and flawless finishing. "I don't know what more I could have done," Van Barneveld said afterward. "This was probably the best I've ever played on a stage, and it still wasn't enough." It was a devastating realization for a man who had spent decades at the top. He wasn't just beaten. He had delivered one of his greatest performances and was still overpowered. For the first time, perhaps, he began to question whether he still belonged among the very best. Although Van Barneveld continued to play, something inside him had shifted. The 2017 match against Van Gerwen wasn't just a passing of the torch. It was a psychological rupture. Over the next 2 years, his performances grew increasingly erratic. He was still capable of flashes of brilliance, but they became less frequent. He began to speak more openly about retirement, about his struggles with motivation, and about the pressure of living up to his legacy. By late 2018, he announced he would retire at the end of the 2019 season. The farewell tour was intended to be a dignified exit, a celebration of a storied career. But fate had a crueler plan. At the 2020 World Championship, in what was supposed to be his final match, Van Barneveld lost in the first round to Darren Young, an American outsider. Visibly crushed, he gave a raw and emotional interview. "I will never forgive myself," he said, wiping away tears.
The last first round, in my disaster year, I will never forgive myself. Never, ever.
It was a heartbreaking moment that revealed just how deeply he still cared, and how much that 2017 loss had echoed in his psyche. Retirement did not sit well with Raymond Van Barneveld. Less than a year later, he announced he would return to competitive darts and enter the PDC Q School in 2021. Many were skeptical, but the darting world couldn't help but cheer for him. This was a man trying not just to play again, but to heal. He earned back his tour card and returned to the professional circuit. In March 2021, he achieved a symbolic triumph, winning Players' Championship 3 by defeating Joe Cullen 8-6 in the final. It was his first ranking title since 2013, and for a moment, it felt like the magic had returned. But the road back was not easy. A health scare later that month, when he collapsed due to a low blood sugar episode during a tournament, raised new concerns about his well-being. Though he recovered, it became clear that this comeback would be a fragile balancing act between his ambition and his physical limits. In 2022, Van Barneveld reminded the world of his brilliance once more. He hit a 9-dart finish in Players' Championship 7 and reached the semifinals of the Grand Slam of Darts, defeating then-world #1 Gerwyn Price along the way. The crowd roared like it was 2007 all over again. Even in his 50s, Barney could still dance with the giants. Yet consistency remained elusive. In 2023, he reached the 3rd round of the World Championship but was eliminated. Through 2024, he continued to play various PDC events with mixed results, strong runs in some tournaments, early exits in others. He remained dangerous but no longer feared. The sport had moved on, and he was now fighting not just opponents, but time itself. There's a poetic quality to Raymond Van Barneveld's career. It's not just the titles or averages that make his story compelling, but the way he laid his soul bare in front of the world. Where other players thrived on bravado, Barney wore his heart on his sleeve. His struggles were public, his passion unfiltered. That 2017 loss to Van Gerwen didn't just break him. It exposed the harsh reality of elite sport, that even greatness can be eclipsed. But to be broken is not to be defeated. His career post-2017 has been a slow, painful climb. Not to reclaim dominance, but to rediscover dignity and joy in the game. And in many ways, that journey has made his legacy even richer. His impact on darts is immeasurable. He turned the Netherlands into a darts-loving nation. He inspired players like Van Gerwen himself. He made the game emotional, human, relatable. When he walked into arenas to the sound of Eye of the Tiger, fans didn't just see a player, they saw a story, a fighter. And maybe that's the real triumph. The 2017 World Championship semifinal was, without question, the match that broke Raymond Van Barneveld. Not because he failed, but because he gave the best of himself, and it still wasn't enough. It shattered his confidence, planted the seeds of doubt, and marked the beginning of a long emotional unraveling. But that moment, painful as it was, also illuminated something beautiful: his resilience. Barney's journey since then has been about more than darts. It's about identity, aging, passion, and the painful grace of letting go. In a sport measured by millimeters, it was Raymond Van Barneveld's humanity that left the biggest mark. And that, above all else, is why he'll never be forgotten.